Welcome to the Spy Collection Digital Edition, where we're looking at spy artifacts that only exist in digital format. Here is Anastasios, and in this episode, we'll look at this slide deck from Snowden's files. The specific one was publicly disclosed on February 7, 2015, and it even included some presenter notes that help us further understand its context. It was for a presentation that Britain's SIGINT agency, the GCHQ, did at the 2012 SIGDEV Conference. SIGDEV, or SIGINT Development Conference, was, and likely still is, a classified top-secret event for the SIGINT agencies of the Five Eyes Alliance to meet and share tradecraft, lessons learned, and exchange ideas. This context is important since it gives us the mindset that this presentation was written with. And that said, the presentation titled Cyber Integration, the Art of the Possible, was a joint effort between the offensive and defensive sides of GCHQ's cyber units, the CDO, or Cyber Defense Operations, and JTRIG, or Joint Threat Research Intelligence Group. Actually, if you'd like to see more of our walkthroughs for JTRIG's presentations, check the video's description. We'll link all of the ones we have published before. Back to the presentation, we reconstructed it to be easier to navigate. And after this landing slide, we have the introduction of the JTRIG's core functions. Note on the top left we also have the logo of GCHQ's ISD, the Intelligence, Defense and Effects Unit, which was comprised of SIGINT analysts at the time of this presentation. Now, if you watched our previous episodes, you are probably already well aware, but if you haven't, those core functions were covert internet investigations. This means the ability to use the cyberspace to research a subject. Let's say how a terrorist group communicates and what platforms they are using. Forensic investigation and analysis. Things like if a system was compromised, discover how it was compromised, the tradecraft used, and so on. Active covert internet operations, including online human intent effects. This is what most people know today as cyber influence operations, as well as cyber sabotage. Covert technical operations is what most know as cyber espionage, basically hacking into devices and networks to collect information. Provision of unattributable internet access is self-explanatory. Is designing and implementing infrastructure that allows British spies to access internet resources without that activity being traced back to the UK government. And lastly, development of new capability. As we read in the presenter notes, development of new capability means capabilities being developed to access data from various internet services, how these data sources may help to mitigate the loss that passive access could suffer to encryption, how to look further at integrating, fusing these data sources into our analytic stores and workflows. And here's the rest of the presenter notes for this slide. Note that they're also mentioning the online covert action accreditation program. We have an entire episode dedicated to just this. Check it out if you're interested. Now, for British cyber spies, effects has a very specific meaning. As we read, it means using online techniques to make something happen in the real or cyber world. And it has two broad categories: information operations to influence or disrupt, and technical disruption. In GCHQ lingo, those were called online covert action operations, and it's anything under the 4 Ds: deny, disrupt, degrade, or deceive. And once again, we have a dedicated episode going through the cyber effects of JTRIG. And here you see the speaker notes. It instructed the speaker to talk a little bit more about those two categories, but the presentation itself does it anyway in the upcoming slides. So here's how this was done. Stop someone from communicating. That's a technical disruption online covert action, which could be done in 2012 by bombarding their phone with text messages, bombarding their phone with calls, delete their online accounts, or block up their fax machine. As we read in the speaker notes, such operations were conducted by JTRIG in Afghanistan to disrupt Taliban operations. These operations included things like sending targets a text message every 10 seconds or so, or calling targets consistently on a regular basis. They also tell us that deleting someone's online presence is very annoying, forcing them to disrupt their normal activities, and that faxes were still used in some parts of the world, so although it was, even back in 2012, an old technology, they were still a valid target for JTRIG. the next method was to discredit a target. For example, set up an online honey trap, change their photos on social networking sites, write a blog purporting to be one of their victims, email, text their colleagues, neighbors, friends, etc. The speaker notes explain this in more detail. For honey trap, we read that it was a great option and it was very successful when it worked. Basically get someone to go somewhere on the internet or a physical location to be met by a friendly face. Or as JTRIG called it, shaping the environment. Basically tricking an individual to be in a place that enables your operations. About the other point, the photo change, as we read in the notes, it can take paranoia to a whole new level. And in terms of the blog writing, we read that it has worked on a number of different operations, and one example is a serious crime operation where the name is redacted, and they also used this to discredit individuals in Iran. The last point of emailing and texting associates of the target, the notes say that this could involve infiltration work and helps JTRIG acquire credibility with online groups, basically tricking people to think that they received a tip from a trusted source, while it was actually JTRIG, which could result in those individuals either supporting or targeting the person they received the tip for. Next we have discredit a company, leak confidential information to companies, the press via blogs, etc., post negative information on appropriate forums, and stop deals, ruin business relationships. And in terms of the notes, it tells us that this is a style of information operations where JTRIG could use either open source information or releasable SIGINT items to target specific entities and make it look like an attempt to inform the public. Then we have a redacted case that goes about the first stages of disruption and/or discrediting companies and organizations. And as per the last bullet point, this can stop, divert the flow of funding, introduce panic, etc. Then we have a classic deception technique to get another country to believe a secret. Place secret information on a compromised computer, or send secret information across a network visible to the adversary's SIGINT capabilities, or provide secret information through an online agent. For the first part, JTRIG worked with GCHQ's hackers, the CNE, and they used various masquerading type of techniques to place potentially damning information where appropriate. In terms of the second option, the visible networks, we read that they could shape the environment so that SIGINT can provide BDA for operations, or use releasable information for the same purpose. And about the last option, it could be leaking information using online aliases, visibly shaping the online environment. On a more targeted approach, we have stop someone's computer from working, send them a virus, ambassador's reception, encrypt itself, delete all emails, encrypt all files, make screen shake, no more logon, or conduct a denial of service attack on their computer. And in the notes it gives more context that ambassador's reception is one of the various JTRIG tools. Nowadays this kind of destructive malware is typically referred to as data wipers or ransomware. This also implies that JTRIG developed one of the very first ransomware. Now in terms of active collection techniques, JTRIG could provide answers to questions like who does what institutions etc. are being used, what companies, who sets up the websites, how do they communicate between ministries and/or each other, how do they communicate to investors, and how do they store information. As per the speaker notes, in essence, Intel analysts use SIGINT to answer the pattern of life question. But do they know the online pattern of life for their target? Do the analysts know not just what their target is doing, but what is it thinking? So eventually, what is the impact of those effects? And how do you measure this impact? JTRIG had two ways: the bleach-style approach, creating as much disruption as possible within a short period of time, or the more subtle approach, where the effects are less likely to be detected, therefore more sustainable over a longer period of time. And that leads us to the topic of this presentation, the cyber integration. The advantages were to provide an opportunity for JTRIG analysts to be more actively involved with ISD counterparts, to enable further upskilling, to provide JTRIG analysts with the opportunity to identify CNA-type options a lot earlier in operations, to provide ISD analysts with a greater baseline and understanding of JTRIG's work, and an opportunity for analysts to learn new advanced computer network operation skills, such as online human operations. And the disadvantages were the then lack of JTRIG IT infrastructure on the general floor plate, the lack of wider resource investment, a lack of overall training and support resources, and that the integration process could be resource intensive for CDO. And that was the slide deck for this episode, providing a unique look in the early steps of Britain's GCHQ into exploitation of the cyberspace for covert operations. Remember that this was presented as top secret material for the then cutting-edge cyber espionage tradecraft. That's now 13 years old, and just imagine what today's SIGDEV content for GCHQ might look like. Cyberspace is a primary domain for intel services, and that historical document gives us a glimpse into how spies see it, showing us why nothing is as it seems.